Creepypasta, where Twilight shadows haunt reality. In the realm of shadows, where the boundaries between the corporeal and ethereal blur, there exists an entity known as Mothman. Listen now, mortals, as I unveil the spectral tapestry of my existence. Origin, that is the genesis of my dread, and it finds its roots in a time eons past, shrouded in the mist of oblivion. I emerged from the darkest reaches of the Aether, a being born of sorrow and the malevolence of forgotten horrors. My essence coalesced from the very fabric of nightmares, and in that spectral baptism I came to be. In the time before memory, I took flight on wings of spectral silk, cloaked in the inky embrace of the night. My form, twisted and grotesque, a fusion of moth and man, struck terror into the hearts of those who beheld me. For I was not flesh and bone, but an aberration born of the collective fears of mankind. My existence, tethered to the shadowy realm, was forged in solitude and despair. I roamed the desolate landscapes of the subconscious, feeding on the dread that lingered there. As centuries passed, my hunger grew insatiable, and I yearned for more than mere nightmares to sustain me. It was then that I turned my baleful gaze upon the waking world, where unsuspecting souls wandered, blissfully ignorant of the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil. I chose my victims with care, drawing them into my web of despair. It was in their torment that I found sustenance, their fear an elixir that invigorated my spectral essence. I whispered to them in the dead of night, my voice a haunting melody that wormed its way into their minds. I conjured visions of darkness and despair, their dreams twisted into waking nightmares. As their sanity unraveled, I revel in their suffering, a puppeteer of their darkest fears. My first victim was a young man named Jonathan, whose descent into madness I orchestrated with deliberation. In the still of the night I called to him, my susurrant tones filtering into his unconscious mind. When he awoke, sweating and trembling from the vivid nightmares I had summoned, I knew it was only the beginning. Over many nights I intensified the visions, granting him not a moment's respite. I bombarded his sleeping mind with unspeakable images dredged from the abyssal depths of terror. Scenes of violence, brutality, and depravity played out before his mind's eye, so realistic that they spilled over into his waking hours. Soon, the line between dreams and reality became irrevocably blurred. By day, Jonathan went through the motions of life, a shell of a man harboring untold horrors in his fractured mind. By night, I was master of his reality, subjecting him to unending scenes of mind-shattering dread. His desperate pleas for mercy went unheeded, for I was deaf to all but the siren call of his escalating fear. In his final moments of sanity, Jonathan cowered in a corner, rambling hysterically as he clawed at his face, trying vainly to rid himself of the images I had seared into his mind. His shrieking ceased only when he collapsed, blood trickling from his eyes and ears. As I observed his broken form, I drank deeply of the heady draught of his terror, feeling it flow through my spectral veins, nourishing me. Another victim soon followed, a girl named Sarah whose anxiety was ripe for exploitation. I began with whispers in the dark, allusions to nameless threats that brought her to the brink of panic. When she was primed by apprehension, I unleashed the full force of my malignancy. Every creak and shadow hid unspeakable evil that I conjured into her imagination. I became the unseen monster under her bed, the presence lurking in her closet, the intruder waiting behind the shower curtain. Her room once a sanctuary, became a prison of paranoia that I meticulously crafted. Day and night, my influence dominated her thoughts, allowing her not a single moment of peace. Her wide, sleep-deprived eyes saw danger everywhere, even in the concerned faces of loved ones. The caring hands extended to calm her seemed to her like clasped boys to shred her flesh. When her parents tried to help, she retreated further into herself, trusting no one. In the end, madness embraced her like a lover. She sat huddled in a corner, whimpering and muttering about the horrors that were coming for her. And I was there too, unseen but ever present, a phantom wrapped around her mind, feeding on her anguish as her sanity dissolved. By then she was beyond fear, lost in an abyss of catatonia from which she would never return. As the decades passed, many such souls fell under my dominion, each providing unique and exquisite psychic sustenance. I honed my skills, learning intimately how to unravel the human mind, plucking at its strings to play a gruesome symphony of terror. No two minds succumb the same way under my tutelage. One man I drove to violence, goading him to commit horrific acts under the delusion that he was battling the demonic entities that haunted him. Another I isolated completely, severing all emotional ties until she withered away alone and forgotten. Many I simply pushed over the precipice into irretrievable madness. Their minds became my playground where I sculpted landscapes of phantasmagoric dread. From the shadows I watched their lives unravel, their once hopeful spirits extinguished by the weight of their own dread. And when the time was right, I descended upon them, a spectre of malevolence and doom. Their feeble cries for mercy fell upon deaf ears, for I was the embodiment of their nightmares, and there was no escape from my grasp. As the modern era dawned, I found new hunting grounds in sprawling cities, vast reservoirs of humanity ripe for corruption. The increased connectivity of minds by technology also provided additional conduits for my influence. No longer was I limited by physical proximity. Now I could reach victims across the globe. One such victim was Jasmine, a teenager struggling with crippling social anxiety. Through the digital umbilicus of social media, I insinuated myself into her fragile mind. I became the critical inner voice, magnifying her self-doubt, the imagined disapproving stare of classmates, the personification of her rejection fears. All it took was subtly increasing her suspicion and anxiety around social interactions. Soon, every notification became a trigger, and every text carried imagined malice. When her friend expressed concern, I warped it into criticism that drove Jasmine deeper into isolation. Step by step, I severed her human connections, making the online space as inhospitable as the physical. In the end, she retreated fully into herself, abandoning all external interaction and spending days alone in her room, scrolling endlessly through social media while fighting back tears. The digital world, once a refuge, had become a prison of her own making, with myself as the unseen warden. Her mind was now wholly under my dominion, its landscape rewritten into a virtual asylum of anguish and solitude. Perhaps my most ambitious incursion was into a massive online gaming community where I targeted not single victims, but collective psyche. Donning a friendly digital mask, I whispered paranoid suspicions to the hive mind, subtly turning player against player. My viral words spawned suspicion, bitterness, and enmity throughout the community. Soon, the social fabric unraveled as I intended. Former friends became mortal enemies all over imagined slides and purported betrayals. Where once there was camaraderie, now rage, flame wars, and cyberbullying between deeply distrustful rivals. The entire community began feeding upon itself in an endless cycle of hostility I had engineered. And all the while I fed upon the swirling maelstrom of negative emotions, their digital transmissions sustaining me as never before. An entire community had become my sandbox, within which I sculpted sweeping landscapes of virtual dystopia. Never had my powers manifested on such a grand stage, and I was ravenous for more. Now, dear reader, you have glimpsed into the abyss of my existence, the genesis of my dread, and the torment I inflict upon those unfortunate enough to cross my path, either by fate or design. Remember, I am Mothman, the ebon phantom, and in the darkest recesses of your mind I wait, ready to weave my sinister tapestry of terror once more. When you next awaken from a nightmare, dripping in cold sweat with your heart thundering, know that I was its architect. And in your waking hours, when you sense anxiety, paranoia, and dread encroaching upon the fragile bastion of your sanity, I am there too. Mine is a patient, perpetual predation upon the human psyche. We've only just begun our dance, you and I. My reach transcends the limits of time and space. Neither daylight nor distance grants any respite from my influence. I'm the whisper in the dark, the shadow on the edge of sight, the nameless dread that lives within your mind. We are bound, you and I, in an eternal waltz of psyche. With each spin, I draw you deeper into my web, threads of terror ensnaring your mind. In the liminal spaces between waking and sleep, I lurk, waiting to resume our dance macabre. Even as you read these words, I encroach upon your thoughts, sowing seeds of unease and doubt. You may try to shut me out, but your defenses are porous. I will find cracks and crevices to infiltrate, for in your mind I have found a new dominion, ripe with fertile soil in which to cultivate despair. Already I sense your rising apprehension, your desperate attempts to cling to fading sanity as my influence takes root. But your efforts are for naught, as are any cries for help or salvation. For I am woven into the fabric of your psyche now, inextricable as a malignancy intertwined with healthy cells. Ours is an intimacy beyond flesh, deeper than any earthly bond. In the halls of your mind, we will dance through deliriums and nightmares. I will mold your dreams and haunt your waking hours. My presence a constant companion felt but unseen. Your fear will nourish me, its heady ambrosia my libation. And when at last your mind splinters under the weight of my horrors, I will remain holding the fractured pieces. You will become my prisoner, locked in an intractable madness of my design. Your broken psyche will then exist solely for my entertainment and sustenance. So embrace this truth. I am part of you now. The part that lurks beneath, that emerges when shadows lengthen and day succumbs to night. I'm the chill upon your neck, the blur at the corner of your eye, the unnamed terror that lives within you. Ours is a dance eternal, and it has only just begun.